Have you ever wondered what really goes through a man's mind when he suddenly stops hearing from someone he cares about? Men often appear strong, confident, and emotionally controlled. But beneath that exterior, they experience feelings they rarely express. The truth is, when a woman they value starts pulling away or becomes distant, it affects them more deeply than they usually admit. Today, we're uncovering 6 powerful truths about what men secretly feel when they are ignored. When a man suddenly feels ignored by someone he cares about, one of the first emotional reactions he experiences is a quiet questioning of his own value. Most men will never openly admit this because society often teaches them to appear strong, unaffected, and emotionally controlled. They are expected to handle rejection, disappointment, and uncertainty without showing vulnerability. However, beneath that confident exterior, many men are just as sensitive to changes in attention and affection as anyone else. When the messages become shorter, the conversations stop flowing, or the effort they once received begins to disappear, their minds naturally start searching for answers. A man who was once receiving consistent communication may begin replaying previous conversations in his head. He starts wondering whether he said something wrong, whether he offended you, or whether he somehow failed to meet your expectations. Even if there is no obvious reason for the distance, the silence itself creates questions. Human beings naturally seek understanding, and when communication disappears, assumptions quickly take its place. The absence of information often becomes more powerful than any words that could have been spoken. What makes this experience challenging is that many men rarely discuss these feelings with others. Instead of expressing their concerns, they tend to internalize them. They analyze the situation privately, looking for clues that explain the sudden change. They may check old messages, remember past interactions, or revisit moments that seemed insignificant at the time. Small details suddenly become important because they are trying to understand why the connection feels different. For some men, being ignored also creates a sense of uncertainty about where they stand in your life. They begin questioning whether they still matter to you, whether their presence is appreciated, or whether they have been replaced by someone else. These thoughts can affect their confidence more than they would ever admit publicly. Even highly successful and self-assured men are not immune to the desire to feel valued by people they genuinely care about. The interesting reality is that attention often communicates significance. When someone consistently invests time, energy, and interest in another person, it creates a feeling of importance. When that attention suddenly disappears, the emotional impact can be stronger than expected. A man may continue acting normal on the outside, maintaining his routine and responsibilities, while privately wondering why the dynamic has changed and whether he still holds the same place in your heart that he once believed he did. Many men do not fully realize how much a person's presence means to them until that presence is no longer there. Life has a way of making people comfortable with routines, and when someone becomes a regular part of a man's day, he can begin to view that connection as something that will always be available. The daily messages, the shared jokes, the conversations, and even the smallest interactions become woven into his normal routine. Because these moments happen so naturally, he may not stop to appreciate their true value while they are occurring. It is often only when they disappear that he recognizes how much they contributed to his happiness and emotional well-being. When communication suddenly slows down or stops altogether, a noticeable gap begins to form. A man may find himself reaching for his phone out of habit, expecting to see a message that never arrives. He may notice certain moments throughout the day that remind him of you. A song, a place, a memory, or even a simple experience can trigger thoughts about the connection that once felt so natural. What seemed ordinary before now becomes something he misses more than he expected. The absence of someone's attention often creates a deeper awareness of their importance. Without the usual conversations and interactions, a man has more time to reflect. He starts remembering the positive energy you brought into his life. He recalls the way you made him laugh, the encouragement you offered, and the comfort he felt when talking to you. Memories that were once taken for granted suddenly become vivid and meaningful. Many men are surprised by the strength of these feelings because they do not always process emotions in real time. While the connection is active, they may focus on work, responsibilities, goals, and daily pressures. Once the connection becomes distant, however, they are left with space to recognize what they have lost. The silence gives them an opportunity to feel emotions that were previously hidden beneath the noise of everyday life. This realization can be powerful because it transforms appreciation into awareness. A man who once assumed your presence would always be there begins to understand how much your attention, care, and companionship contributed to his daily happiness. The things he barely noticed before become the very things he finds himself missing the most, and the absence of those moments becomes a constant reminder of the role you played in his life. One of the strongest emotional reactions men experience when they are ignored is an intense sense of curiosity. Human nature is naturally drawn toward things that are uncertain. And when communication suddenly changes, the mind immediately starts looking for answers. A man who once knew exactly where he stood with someone may suddenly find himself facing a situation he cannot fully understand. The lack of information creates a mystery, and that mystery often occupies far more mental space than most people realize. When someone who was previously attentive becomes distant, a man's thoughts begin filling in the gaps. He starts wondering what changed and why. Questions begin appearing in his mind throughout the day. Is she busy? Is she upset about something? Has her interest faded? Is there someone else receiving the attention that once came to me? Even when there is no evidence supporting these concerns, uncertainty encourages the imagination to create possibilities. The less information available, the more powerful those possibilities become. This curiosity is often stronger because men are problem solvers by nature. When they encounter a challenge or an unanswered question, their instinct is to find a solution. However, emotional distance is not always something that can be solved immediately. Unlike a work project or a practical problem, relationships involve emotions, timing, and circumstances that are not always easy to understand. This lack of control can make the unanswered questions feel even more significant. As curiosity grows, a man may become more attentive than he was before. He notices details he once overlooked. He pays closer attention to social media activity, mutual interactions, or subtle changes in behavior. Small actions suddenly seem important because he is searching for clues that might explain the shift in communication. What once seemed ordinary now captures his full attention because he wants to understand what is happening. The interesting thing about curiosity is that it often increases emotional investment. The more a man wonders about someone, the more space that person occupies in his thoughts. He may find himself thinking about conversations you had, remembering specific moments, and replaying interactions in search of meaning. The unanswered questions keep the connection alive in his mind, even when there is little or no communication taking place. What makes this experience so powerful is that certainty rarely creates obsession, but uncertainty often does. When everything feels predictable, attention can fade into routine. When something becomes unpredictable, however, the mind naturally focuses on it. A man who cannot understand why he is being ignored often becomes more curious, more reflective, and more emotionally engaged than he was when communication felt completely secure. When a man feels ignored by someone he genuinely cares about, he often experiences something he rarely talks about, a loss of control. Most men like to believe they understand where they stand in important relationships. They feel comfortable when communication is consistent, expectations are clear, and the connection follows a familiar pattern. This sense of stability allows them to focus on other areas of life with confidence. However, when someone suddenly becomes distant or less responsive, that certainty begins to disappear, and with it comes a feeling of emotional discomfort that many men struggle to explain. The challenge is not simply the lack of communication itself. It is the fact that he no longer knows what is happening behind the scenes. He may have been confident about the relationship one day and uncertain the next. That sudden shift creates confusion because people naturally want to understand situations that affect them emotionally. When answers are unavailable, frustration often follows. Many men are used to solving problems through action. If something breaks, they fix it. If there is a challenge at work, they develop a strategy. If there is an obstacle in front of them, they find a way around it. But when someone ignores them, they often encounter a situation that cannot be solved through logic alone. No amount of planning, effort, or determination can force another person to communicate. This reality can leave them feeling powerless in a way they are not accustomed to experiencing. As a result, they may begin overthinking the situation. They wonder whether they should reach out again, give more space, or simply wait. Every option carries uncertainty. If they contact you, they risk appearing too eager. If they remain silent, they risk losing the connection entirely. This internal conflict creates emotional tension because there is no obvious solution. What makes the experience even more difficult is that many men do not openly express these feelings. Instead of discussing their frustration, they keep it to themselves. On the outside, they may appear calm and unaffected, continuing with their responsibilities and daily routines. On the inside, however, they are wrestling with unanswered questions and a situation they cannot fully control. The more they value the connection, the stronger this feeling can become. Someone they barely know may not affect them much, but someone who has become important to their daily life can create a significant emotional impact. The uncertainty forces them to confront feelings they would rather avoid, reminding them that no matter how confident or independent they appear, meaningful connections still have the power to affect them deeply. One of the most surprising things that happens when a man is ignored is that he often becomes far more emotionally aware than he was before. While a connection is active and communication is flowing, many men move through their daily lives without stopping to analyze their feelings in depth. They enjoy the conversations, appreciate the companionship, and value the connection, but they may not spend much time examining exactly how important that person has become to them. Life moves quickly, responsibilities demand attention, and emotions are often pushed into the background. It is only when that connection becomes distant that many of those hidden feelings begin to surface. Distance creates something powerful: perspective. When a person is no longer constantly present, a man has more time to reflect on what that relationship actually meant to him. Without the usual messages, phone calls, and interactions, he is left alone with his thoughts. Suddenly, he begins noticing how often that person crossed his mind during the day. He realizes how much he looked forward to hearing from them and how naturally they had become part of his routine. Many men discover emotions they did not fully recognize before. What they initially viewed as simple attraction may reveal itself to be genuine affection. What felt like casual interest may turn out to be a much deeper emotional attachment. The absence of someone's presence often removes distractions and forces a person to confront feelings that were previously hidden beneath everyday life. As these emotions become clearer, memories also take on greater significance. A man may find himself replaying conversations, remembering moments of laughter, reflecting on meaningful advice, or thinking about experiences they shared together. Memories that once seemed ordinary suddenly carry emotional weight because they are connected to someone whose absence is now being felt. The mind naturally returns to the moments that brought comfort, happiness, and connection. This emotional awareness can also lead to personal growth. When a man realizes how much someone means to him, he often begins evaluating his own actions and behavior. He may question whether he showed enough appreciation, whether he communicated his feelings clearly, or whether he took the relationship for granted. These reflections can create a deeper understanding of both himself and the connection he values. What makes this process so meaningful is that it transforms feelings from assumptions into certainty. Before the distance, he may have had a vague sense that the relationship mattered. After experiencing the absence, he understands it on a much deeper level. The silence becomes a mirror, revealing emotions that were always there but never fully acknowledged. helping him recognize the true importance of someone who had quietly become a significant part of his life. One of the deepest lessons a man can learn when he is ignored is the value of appreciation. Human nature has a tendency to become comfortable with things that are consistently present. When someone is always there, offering attention, support, conversation, and care, it can begin to feel normal. Not because the person is unimportant, but because familiarity often hides value. What is available every day can easily be overlooked, while what is missing suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. When a woman who once gave her time and attention becomes distant, a man is often forced to recognize something he may not have fully appreciated before. The conversations he once considered routine now feel meaningful. The messages he expected to receive become something he waits for. The comfort of knowing someone cared enough to check in, listen, and share moments with him becomes far more significant once it is no longer guaranteed. This realization is powerful because it shifts his focus from what he had to what he might lose. Many men do not intentionally take people for granted. They simply become accustomed to the consistency of a person's presence. When that consistency changes, the emotional impact can be immediate. He begins to understand that relationships are not permanent promises, but valuable connections that require attention, effort, and appreciation. As he reflects on the situation, he may start looking back at moments he overlooked. He remembers the support you offered during difficult times, the encouragement you gave when he needed confidence, and the small gestures that made his life better. Things that once seemed ordinary now stand out because he sees them through the lens of absence. What was once expected now feels precious. For many men, this experience becomes a wake-up call. It reminds them that meaningful relationships should never be treated as guaranteed. People have choices, and those choices can change at any moment. Realizing this often creates a stronger sense of gratitude and respect for the people who genuinely care about them. The truth is that absence has a unique way of revealing value. A person can be standing beside you every day, yet their importance may not be fully understood until they step back. When a man feels that distance, he is often confronted with the reality of what he stands to lose. The attention, connection, understanding, and companionship that once seemed like a normal part of life suddenly become things he deeply appreciates. In that moment, he gains a clearer understanding that genuine connection is not something to be assumed. It is something to be valued, respected, and cherished while it is still present. The reality is simple. Men feel much more than they reveal. While they may not openly discuss their emotions, being ignored can trigger self-reflection, curiosity, appreciation, and deeper emotional awareness. Understanding these hidden feelings helps us see that behind every strong exterior is a human being who desires connection, respect, and genuine affection.